In the previous section, we discussed the personality traits of the individuals who engage in coercive control, manipulation, and abuse. We saw in the overview that such individuals had major defects in their personality, that they were deeply insecure. We also saw that anyone might, at any stage in their life, while going through transition points and normal life blips, become vulnerable and may be preyed upon these kinds of individuals. But what we're seeing is it is the individual who does the preying, that they may be predominantly someone who tracks or someone who ensnares their victim. But in all cases, they are responsible for their actions, and they engage in behaviors that constitute part of the triad of dark personalities. In this section, we will briefly provide an overview of some of the effects that these behaviors will have upon their targets and their victims. Now, not everyone will experience all of these effects, but in my experience, most people will experience the majority of them, if not all of them. There'll be a few who only experience one or two, but most people that I've supported experience the majority of these kinds of effects upon their lives and their well-being. The first thing is loss of control. They have no longer any autonomy. They cannot do or behave in a way that is authentic to themselves. They do not have freedom to behave in a reciprocal, loving way with partners or an abuser that denies them this. They have become an object to be used by their abuser, and as a result, they have lost any sense of their own personal autonomy. They may experience gaslighting and self-doubt. They may believe that they are the problem. They may believe that they're the crazy one. These are all effects of the abuser and their tactics of manipulation, control, and deflection and projection. They may start feeling unsafe in the presence of the abuser, but also unsafe in the presence of anyone else, emotionally, psychologically, physically, relationally. There is, in many cases, the total loss of ability to make decisions for yourself. The confidence is gone. The ability to make those decisions have been stolen from you. You doubt yourself, and you doubt your ability to know what to do in any given situation. You might have had that ability before, but gradually it's been eroded and taken away from you by the abuser. And with this, there's the loss of personal identity and agency. You lose sight of who you are as a real individual person. You do not have the autonomy and agency to make decisions for yourself and to take control of your own life and to live your life that is authentic and real to your values. With this, you may take on the values of the abuser. You may engage in behaviors that in a previous life before the abuse you would never have engaged in. This might lead to moral trauma, and as you act against your own interests, your own beliefs, your own values. You might experience loss of finances and financial resources. The abuser may take control or require you to hand over finances. They may limit your access to work, to make decisions about how to use credit cards. They may take credit cards and money cards off you and limit your access to banks or to other means of being financially secure and independent. You might find a gradual but significant loss of significant friends, family members, and social supports. There is increasing likelihood that you will be socially isolated without any resources to call on: financial, social, psychological, emotional. And as a result of this, you may develop deep anxiety, depression, in some cases, even PTSD or complex PTSD. In this situation, the individuality of the survivor, the person being targeted by the abuser, is denigrated and denied. You do not have an independent existence outside of the abuser. They, the survivor, become little more than objects to be used and manipulated according to the narcissistic whims of the abuser. Any resources, any skills, any talents are denied, denigrated, put down, or taken away. As a result, the abused person, the survivor, are psychologically colonized. This is a term that I've developed, taken from the work of Daniel Craig, who described the subjugation of the victim by the abuser in terms of being virtually colonized. In this sense, you lose your personal narrative and story. To be colonized is to lose your story. Your sense of self is tied up in your personal story as an independent self. There is no independent self after you enter into an abusive relationship. There is no story independent of and prior to the situation you might have found yourself in, where you're controlled and manipulated. And as a result of this, you lose all social, economic, physical, and spiritual connection to everyone and everything of value. You are totally isolated, alone, and vulnerable to the whims of the abuser. And the result is that the identity, your personal identity, your sense of who you are as a person separate from, but in relationship with others, is subsumed by the abuser. And all your resources are consumed as a parasite consumes their victim. As a parasite colonizes a victim and consumes all that is good and true and valuable within the victim, so too the abuser parasitically, psychologically colonizes, consumes, and exploits their victim. This has further implications. Firstly, there's a failure to develop an authentic sense of self, or a collapse of a pre-existing sense of self. There's chronic shame. And anyone who's been in a situation where they've been abused, controlled, manipulated, and shamed will feel this. You can develop highly fearfully avoidant and disorganized attachment style, where the abuser paints themselves as the source of all that you need, but it's also the source of fear. And with this, there's been pegged to the present that there's no sense of self before, no sense of self in the future. One is stuck in the ever-present now with no sense of who you are apart from this fearful place that you find yourself in, that you're lost in the present, a present that is fearful, a present that is unstable, a present that is insecure. There is fright, but there is no solution to that fright, no chance of resolution. There is the uncertainty as to what will happen next. There are times when the abuser might be calm, be loving, but they might change in an instant. And this changing destabilizes the victim and keeps them in the sense of perpetual fear and uncertainty, where they can be controlled and manipulated. One other point to make is that abusers project onto their victims their own fears and weaknesses. They believe that they do not have any weaknesses, but instead they are deeply insecure and have chronic shame, but they project these onto their victim. To accept that they have weaknesses is something that they cannot consciously accept. They repress this and they reject their own damaged psyche. And the only way to survive psychologically is to project their own weakness onto their victims, onto those they attempt to control, manipulate, and abuse. And as a result, the victim is caught in a state of total dissociative fear. There is no solution. They absorb and interject these false ideas and narratives. They absorb everything that the abuser projects into them through a process of introjection. And these ideas, these false narratives, are taken as true and only true without conscious chewing, without consciously, critically examining whether these ideas have any validity at all.